which was developed and will be moderated by Renee Ellis from the Census Bureau. She has two other colleagues from the Census Bureau today, Ana Sanchez Rivera and Hannah Zimmerman. Unfortunately, Kelly Vet Ortiz Fontanes was not able to come today, I believe. And so she had Dr. Ellis had mentioned that she would like to have some of a interactive sort of session. So the way that we're going to work this is if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, then please raise your hand in the chat and we'll promote you. And Ray, go ahead and just kind of let us know. Let us know when you want to let somebody speak. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great. Excellent. I'm so happy to be here. Just a second. I seem to be having it difficult. Yeah, it looks like we have everybody, right? Hannah and Anna are here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Renee Ellis. I'm very happy to be here. I hope you've all had a great experience at the GASP conference this week. I've really had a good time and I've learned a lot of things. And I just wanted to take a minute here to thank the organizers and all the people who've worked so hard to pull off this event. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it. And the conference actually started with a plenary speaker on the topic of open source software. And throughout the conference, there's actually been some really great examples of that. So we're really honored and pleased to be closing out the conference with a discussion about moving to open source programs and programming, and the idea of sort of trying to transfer over old programs and the challenges of adopting new software. So we're going to just kind of jump right into those topics today. The adoption of open source software for programming and analysis as part of the data modernization is a widespread phenomenon in the federal space, and it brings particular challenges to both production and research processes. And I thought GASP was a really great opportunity for us to talk about those challenges, share potential tools, and solutions for overcoming those challenges. So this is sort of, like Lisa mentioned, a little bit of an unpanel, in that we're going to really open it up and depend on the audience participants and try to get you sort of joined in this. And so I've gathered sort of a group of us together, and we really think that since the movement to open source software is relatively new, there's not a lot of us that can really claim that we are experts. And a lot of my panel members keep telling me that they're not experts, but I feel like we work in this and we work with it, and I think that has something for us to bring to the table. So that's sort of kind of what we're setting up. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these issues and these challenges, and then we're gonna open it up. We have the question and answer space, and hopefully we'll get a chance to sort of raise hands and have you join us. So overall, this is kind of how we're going to do it. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and about what I've been doing, and introduce our panelists. And then we're going to talk a little bit about challenges that are unique to adopting open source software in a research context, because that's really where we work, is in research rather than production. And then I'm going to have some questions for the panel and some questions for the audience, and have you an opportunity. Then we're going to talk about tools and strategies that we've used to address these challenges and some of the hints and tips that we have. And then open the floor for all of you. So if we have any time left, we'll open the floor for any other general discussion that we have. So I have worked for the census for 2010. My original training was actually in sociology and demography. And then I picked up some data science training along the way. I moved over to the research and methodology director in around 2017. And since then, I've been in the Center for Behavioral Research Methodology. So for any of you who are familiar with the census and familiar with CBSM at the census, much of the work is qualitative there. And we do a lot of cognitive testing, focus groups, and usability training. What people don't know about our area is we actually have a small set of folks that are focused on more quantitative work, on improving surveys and using new technologies and tools. So our job really is to dig into new things that can help us. And so I coordinate newer projects like Paradata projects, data science, machine learning, AI projects. And because we work on the projects that use a lot of these newer methods, we're really focused on utilizing open source tools. So enough about me. I'm going to introduce you to my wonderful co-workers who work in CBSM with me, Hannah and Anna. Anna, do you want to go first?
Okay, let me see. Okay, can you see me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. So I'm Ana Sanchez Rivera, and I've been in Census for almost 6 years. And the first few years, the first 5 years, I was in the racial statistics branch, which was in production. And I was working with the question of race in the census and in ACS. And the last year, I joined CBSM, and it's been more in research. And I'm still trying to figure out what my role in CBSM is behind the scenes, but I've been like in the transition of I feel like what I contribute to this panel is that everything has been very new to me. In the racial statistics branch, I was in production, so I use SAS, and I only, because it was production, most of the programs were written already, and I mostly had to learn how to update, like the year and do some of the run, because we had to do that every year. But then in here, I only didn't learn how to program everything from the scratch. So I was learning SAS in there. And then when I moved in here, I started working with Python and with R. And I found that they were a lot more intuitive to me. So I learned them quickly. What took me years with SAS, I just start working on that in this sense. So for me, it's been a journey of learning how to think about a programmer, but also like exposing myself to accessing the data in a very different way. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. So I don't know, that will be my background for now.
Thank you. Hannah, do you want to?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Hannah Zimmerman. So I have been at the Center for Behavioral Methodology for now 2 years, but before that, I had a very short-lived career as a mathematics teacher, and I joined the Census headquarters in 2020, and I had never programmed in SAS. So I had to quickly learn how to program in SAS because I was working for the decennial branch, and we were in the middle of the decennial. So I had to pick that up rather quickly within a very short timeline of just like 4 months. And I could say that when I was learning SAS, one of the key components of picking up that programming language was really having a great mentor. And she works for the Census Bureau. Her name is Miranda Pepe. Some of you may know her if you're from the Census Bureau. And because of that, I really pushed forward with SAS, and I was coding in SAS for about a year and a half, but then I moved on to the evaluations branch, and my supervisor, and the call went out to Census that we were all going to move to open source. And I sort of just put SAS kind of like on the shelf, and I took a 2-week kind of like Python boot camp, which was being offered by my immediate supervisor. And we had to do outlier detection. So I immediately jumped into programming in Python. And when I was in the evaluations branch, there was a call put out by Jessica Klein for an R boot camp. And so I jumped right into programming with R. And just like Anna said, I found R to be very intuitive. And I was programming in SQL and Python, and then I picked up what I thought to be another programming open source tool, which is R. And I got exposed to R Shiny and Dash for Python. And so, my experience has been very quick, but very exciting. And I would say that open source has opened up a whole new world to me. And I'm actually, although I loved being a teacher, I'm actually very excited to work for the Census Bureau and all the opportunities that the Census Bureau has provided for me. And I guess later on we'll speak about the projects and how that open source programming has come into place with some of those projects. But I bring that back to you, Ray.
Thank you. So that's us, and we're really happy to be here. And as you see, we're all kind of in different places with programming. The many parts of the census work in more of a production environment where programs are needed for processing and analyzing are predominantly in SAS, and that code needs to be converted, and then someone needs to keep it updated, and that's not really our area. So there have been some really great talks about sort of converting that sort of timeline. But what we really want to talk about is this idea of that we often don't have set programs. We generally start with some existing programs that have been used in the past, but we almost always have to adapt them to whatever survey or project we're currently working on and the specialized needs of that project. And so in some ways that makes it easier for us because we don't have sort of a set of programs that we're used to. However, for adopting open source software for us, it's really one additional moving part that we've had to sort of add into our research timeline. So one of the biggest challenges for us have been learning new open source tools and models and programming as we've been actually working on projects. So we're working on upskilling, often within very tight schedules. So for an example, for me, I was working on a 2020 census Paradata project, and we figured out that data was structured differently than any of our previous Paradata, which means all of our programs didn't work. So we thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. Let's start with open source software. Let's start the programming there for that. And so I was running the project, we had analysts, and we lost all of our analysts with Python experience. They had started the programs and we lost them. And I just started to learn Python. And so I actually ended up learning Python as I completed analysis. So that's one of, I think, the challenges maybe in the federal government in general that we can talk about, but particularly for us, is we often have to learn sort of on the fly. Anna, you sort of had a similar experience recently. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So I took the same training that Hannah actually proposed to me for the Art Users Conference, user group in Census. And I remember that it was like few months at the training, and when I finished, I had one of the supervisors say, hey, can you help me with this analysis? And it was terrifying. I remember having to put IT tickets and don't even knowing what I was applying to for the ticket. And when I received the permission, I was like, I had to reach out to everyone, like different people. What is this working about? Like, for example, the visualizer. I had no idea what to do with that. So I think that in part of the need, and I don't know if Hannah will be talking about this, because everything was so new, I had to interrupt someone's work, like, hey, Hannah, can you help me doing this? Or like another colleague, hey, can you help me this? And we were like, I think we need to document this somewhere, right? Like having it centralized that if we need it in plain English, we can access it. And then we have the instructions in there documented. So for me, I was not only, as I said, I was learning programming, and then I had to learn how to access protected data, how to slice it, and then like data wrangling, everything in less than 1 month fresh, and like putting and some like three different like data sets together and design the analysis. So I think it was the most challenging. I have done that in less than 6 months. I have written more than 12 programs now. But like that first one was definitely terrifying because it was like doing it everything in the moment that it was needed with the deadline just right in there. And for me, what has helped me is being like AI. AI is artificial intelligence. It has really helped me a lot because I don't know how long I have taken if it was not because of that, of how to learn on the fly. Hey, how can I do this? How do I merge this together? Things that we knew, that I knew, but I didn't remember, that maybe doing a Google search would have been taking longer. But I recognize the challenges even in doing that because accessing the data was really the big thing for me. Like you cannot put a path or, like it doesn't, the AI don't know how it works internally in the agency. So even with a lot of help of actually writing the program, accessing the data for me has been like tremendously difficult, or something that I had to learn with a lot of stress, like using no machine and how do I do that, or like transferring from protected area to just the normal server. So yeah, those have been some of my challenges and experiences.
Hannah, you have some experience with challenges of trying to figure out some things about open source models and using LLMs and other types of programs. Do you want to talk about some of those challenges?
Sure. So I, I think it's been a year since ChatGPT came out. I haven't been counting. I think it's been like a year or so. Maybe it's been like a year and a half. But I think some of the projects that I have worked on with large language models in particular ChatGPT, was when we were trying to research and test whether ChatGPT can actually make synthetic respondents. Could ChatGPT act like a survey respondent and respond likewise to questions that we're giving to it? I think one of the challenges was exactly that, trying to figure out how we could use machine learning along with getting data sources that ChatGPT could digest, getting ChatGPT to recall, getting ChatGPT to, it as a large language model, getting it to, be able to output more than 100, unique respondents. So that was one of the challenges. I don't think I really had, because I have an interest in AI. I had already had exposure on my own free time, and so I didn't see it as a challenge per se. I saw it as an opportunity to really tinker, and I moved on to other projects dealing with Paradata. Especially the one that I presented for at the beginning of this conference, which is the translation pipeline, which had to have what you would call smaller AI models to identify the language and translate the non-English languages and transformer models and sentence transformers and so forth. So I didn't look at it as a challenge, but as an opportunity. And Ray, do you want me to speak more on that, or do you want me to speak more on that later?
Either way, we can pick it up later, or you can talk a little bit more.
I guess we could pick it up later,
Okay.
and then I could maybe show some of what I'm speaking about with those, you know,
Some of your
open
tools.
resource models.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be fun. So there was I'm going to answer the question here in the chat. Someone asked, what guidance are we following and being able to use ChatGPT to support code development? In our agency, we're in a gray zone of being told we're not allowed to use these on our computers. In absence of any clear guidance, we're allowed. So this is definitely different across different agencies. For our agency, we can use ChatGPT and we can use it on our computers, but we cannot use any protected data. So nothing that is protected can go outside to ChatGPT. So that means that when we have to write programs, you have to be careful that anything that you're feeding into ChatGPT to help get answers for programs is not actually protected data. So you can ask general questions, how to program this, or send generic code that doesn't have protected things out to ChatGPT. But we definitely have those kinds of issues of not being able to take that out there. We can use some other LLMs within Census as long as nothing goes outside the firewall. So Hannah can probably talk later about some of the projects that she's worked on with that. There are a couple more questions here, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and jump to those.
And Ray, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there is a question from there's a hand raised in the audience. How do you want to handle those?
Great. Okay, let me do like this other one here, and then we'll go to the hand. So I'll read this one. With the changes to data processing, what kinds of timelines, cycles are you testing to receive leadership sign-off for implementation in a product environment? How have those decision-making conversations worked or not? So that's a really good question about a challenge that I find a lot, because I'm often proposing projects, and we have to have clearance and guidance for any programs we use. We have to make those kinds of decisions, and they can affect timelines. And we have largely had a pretty good experience with that. We have a lot of people working really hard to help us implement tools. We actually have a board that helps us with that, and so we've been able to meet timelines. But it can be a challenge for newer tools, for us to try to convince that we need them, for us to make sure that they are on our approved list that we can use, and that they're adequately containerized. We're using the right things, and all of this is a moving target right now, right? Policy on all of these tools is sort of moving and changing, and so for me, I've tend to play the middleman for all my people who are working on projects, make sure they have the tools they need, and I sort of do the conversations with leadership. So I spend a lot of time trying to get clarity on what tools can we use, what tools can't we use, and this can be challenging. And I bet there's probably other people on the call that have those same kinds of challenges. I'm going to stop there. I have some more things here, some great conversations, but I'm going to stop there and let the person who raised their hand talk, and then we'll come back to these. Were we able to get them?
Hand went down immediately. So.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get them. We'll get them. Let me see. Besides just recreating existing projects, I'm going to read another question. Can you please give examples of projects or features that you're now able to do using open source programs that you weren't able to do before using SAS? Anna or Hannah, do you want to talk about that? About projects that we can do with open source that we weren't able to do with just SAS?
Hi, this is Hannah. I would say anything that really, any of those projects that really you need visualizations in, that visualizations would get the data into the hands of the sponsor in a much more interactive way, in a much more understandable way. Any project that, you know, with open source, any project that has to do with natural language processing, any of those types of projects definitely would benefit from open source. If open source makes that, you know, that program more efficient, then you would want to move it over to open source. You would want to move it to open source because the colleges themselves are no longer supporting SAS. And so now you have statisticians coming out of college being hired at your organization, or data scientists being hired at your organization who are only coding in R or Python. So the transition to open source is just, it's happening. And I think the sooner that we grab onto that train and ride it, the better off we're going to be, because there are many, many packages and a lot more that's supported for us to do with open source than SAS, which is more geared for, I believe, you know, it's my opinion, is more geared for statistics than per se data science.
Yeah, I would say that that having data science tools for me has actually really opened up the creativity of being able to think outside just the statistical tools and think about how can we think about all of these other tools and integrating them into projects. So I recently actually did a project where I did qualitative work on Paradata. And then I used machine learning models, and SAS certainly has those, but I found open source software is a lot more flexible with those types of things. And I use those models to then back up to show that the patterns that I were finding were legitimate patterns, right? So crossing across qualitative and quantitative and new methods is something that I think we can do faster and easier with open source software. And for me, that's one of the powers of it. So Peter has a question, and Peter, I hear you with this question. Peter says, I've seen a couple of major software language transitions. I have too. People were actually using Unix when I started, and then they had to transfer to SAS, and now we're transferring to open source. So yes, one case was very stressful for people who had any reason not to switch quickly, either a late adopter type of person or committed to a method they already worked. In the other case, there was more time, and early adopters were allowed to go first and did a lot of preparation, so the new environment was understood before the late adopters had to use it. Either way, some people leave the organization before they will switch. And the question is, how stressful do you think such a transition has to be for late adopters? And I think that's a really great question, and maybe Anna and Hannah have some feedback here, but for me, I think that if we can, some of us early adopters really can pave the way by making sure that the documentation is in order, by making sure there's training in place, by having people who are there, like Hannah mentioned, mentoring. I find mentoring for tools really important. And I spend a lot of time helping people use new tools and adopt new tools. And I think that is the key. The key is really having people willing to mentor and willing to help those later adopters move in. And I think that's how you lower the stress is by having the people who adopt early kind of helping pave the way, figure out what works and what doesn't, and make sure that that's documented clearly for the people there are some people I know that are never going to want to adopt over. But I think that there are definitely ways for us to do this. Hannah, Anna, do either of you have thoughts about that, about helping late adopters?
I do remember that when I was in in production side, they were preparing us to say, like we are going to be transitioning to open source, to Python from SAS, and it was a lot. It was very stressful for my colleagues. For me, it was like, okay, I don't know anything. So if I'm going to learn something, I'm ready to learn. And I start identifying the programs that we needed to transition. But what I think that we were having some very basic problems in the production, that it was like not being able to access the data. I think that we needed to download it and then work with the R or with Python in our in the software in the laptop, which was something that we couldn't do necessarily because the data was so big. And then when I moved to this new area, I learned that we did it, you guys, like you're saying, like it was an everyday task in here. And it was like, how is that inside the same agency we're having two very different experiences? And we cannot do it in one place, and then this is an everyday thing to do in the other. So I know that there are things that as an analyst I don't know that are behind the scenes, the large of the data, the protection of the data, that we cannot do. But there are going to be interesting challenges. But that's why I feel that we need like to have the communication and documentation in place, that those problems that were like unthinkable of how we're going to solve it inside the same agency were already being worked on. So
Thank you, Anna. So I have about several questions that are talking about sort of the challenge of size. And that to me has been the largest challenge, is trying to figure out, SAS is actually very efficient with dealing with very, very large data sets and analysis of large data sets. And there are several people here that have sort of talked about that challenge. We've got one, talking about a question here asking what characteristics of like very large data sets have prevented us from transitioning off of SAS. And there's a question here about the SAS platform has implemented highly sophisticated statistical methodology that's not always in SAS. So yeah, these have been to me the largest challenges of converting to open software, is trying to figure out how to work with large files, trying to figure out how to do things that I could do very easily in SAS that I can't do very easily in other programs. And I would go out on the limb to say that there are still some reasons for us to maintain some programs like SAS platform for some tasks. I think that we should use tools to their strengths and use the right tools for the job. And that may not be the opinion that everyone has. I know there are a lot of people that want to move totally to open source, but I find that there are things that SAS does very well that other programs don't. And I find that Python and R have strengths that SAS don't have. And so I think that we have to think about within this environment of thinking about that. And someone else says here that one of the main challenges is backward compatibility, particularly when it comes to public entities that are supposed to support the service in the long run. And I think these are all really valid challenges, and I don't know that I have the answers for all of them as far as like how we overcome them. I really think what we do is we find the kinds of programs that work for the kinds of things we do, and try to mix them, and maybe eventually the open source software will be able to solve some of these problems that it can't solve right now, but will in the future. And so that's kind of my thought. And in the interest of time, I want to move along to solutions, but does anyone in the audience have any other sort of challenges or thoughts that they want to bring up? And I tried to sort of touch on all of the questions, but I don't know that I fully answered all of them. I'm going to try to, and I know Hannah is typing some answers for us as we speak. So hopefully she will get to some of those questions, but does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to just move on in the interest of time to talk about some hints and tips and some challenges, because despite all of the challenges that we have had, moving over and converting and figuring out how to deal with space and how to deal with all of these issues, we've actually made some really good progress on some projects, and we have some that have been completely converted to open source. So I'm working on right now some generic Peridata programs that are fully open source. And even though sometimes I think, like Anna mentioned, it's a little bit of a trial by fire, I feel like I'm a lot more capable of managing those programs in Python and some R than I was. And so for me, in order to sort of work through that, I find I'm starting to be a little old school. I really Google a lot to find answers, and I rely on OpenStack as resources to learn new programs. And Anna mentions ChatGPT. I don't use that as much, but I would love to have a little bit of conversation with those people who do use it. Anna, what resources do you use? Can you talk a little bit more about ChatGPT and how you used it, or other resources that you use?
Anna or Hannah.
Anna.
Yeah, so when I was I had to translate some of the codes from SAS to Python or to R, and because I couldn't understand, I had to rely on ChatGPT to tell me what was happening in that code, and for me to understand it. And then I decided that I had to drop. I couldn't like translate word by word, like line by line what was happening in SAS, because there is like a different way of how to think about the data set in there. So, and because I was not trained into that way of SAS, I had to, okay, like I summarize, this is what is happening, forget about SAS, and then I move on and try to think of what I knew that it was in R. But how do I use it? I'm mostly asking questions as is Google, and then like try to adapt it to my code.
Yeah, I have found when I have used ChatGPT, one of the struggles for me of switching over from SAS and Stata and some of those statistical programs to open source is really the logic. For me, like the new open source programs have sets of logic in the way you think about programming and the way you think about doing things that is very different. And that was always a struggle for me. And so I found it wasn't helpful to just like pull code and say, ChatGPT, reproduce this for me. What I really had to do was say, okay, if I had a problem like this that I wanted to do in Python, how would I do that? And sort of use lots of prompting to be able to do it. That was sort of the way that it worked, that ChatGPT does work for me, is to sort of give it lots of prompts and give it lots of direction. And then it can kind of help me. But I have found sometimes it's a lot of work, and I also don't have the language that I need to be able to do that. So and so that to me sometimes can be a struggle, is learning the sort of like knowledge and language that I need to ask intelligent questions. And I find that I find that a challenge sort of with even Googling it or using Stack Overflow, is that sometimes those are the things that are a challenge for me. Often I've found that when I really get stuck, instead of reaching out to internet sources, I reach into sources that I know. I'll reach out to Hannah, who's very good at understanding models, or I'll reach out to people I know who program well in a language. I found my network of people who can help me. And I think that networks of people are important. I've been trying to build networks of people to help us as we move more people over to open source, that there are people for them to go to. And Hannah is always my go-to for models and selecting models and those kinds of open source tools. And so I'm going to turn it over to Hannah and let her talk a little bit about hints and tips for selecting models.
Can you hear me? Okay, so one of the things when I go looking for models, well, what are open source models anyways? They're fully trained models with parameters shared by the open source community. And usually the training data and the source code will be shared in many cases. And of course, there's popular locations for where you could find such models, and they're usually found in repositories and registries like Hugging Face, GitHub. Let me see if I could share my screen. Let me see where I have that. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Can I get back here to share my screen? Yes, good. Okay, share this screen. So before you were speaking about good places to actually find resources for when you're learning a program. I didn't hear anybody mention W3 Schools. W3 Schools has many programming languages. First of all, I know I've been off topic about the open source models, but if you are looking for JavaScript or SQL or Python or Pandas, let me see what the lower is. Yes, good. And so forth. This really, it even has R. It has Git, which I found really, really nice. If it'll go there. So W3 Schools, if you are, picking up an open source language, this is sort of like an open book notebook for you. It'll help you just keep a track of what you're learning. And if you need a refresher, you can go there, and it's a really great resource. Just letting you know, W3 Schools. Okay, so, but in any case, let me go back to open source models. So as I said, these models can be found in repositories and registries. So I just want to, oh, no. Let me see if I could get to it. Okay, good. So I am here at Hugging Face. This is one of those repositories that I spoke about. And it has here 1,822,899 models so far up to this date, right? So the models are easy to download, and I know we touched upon policy, right? Yes, you should know your organization's policy, and you should know also that, especially with the Census Bureau, we're all about the privacy and protection of our data. So one of our policies is that yes, as long as we do have the permission, we can download a model, but we have to run it locally on our servers. That way there's no API involved. You don't want an API involved because you want to protect the privacy of your data. So, but the potential is there as long as you do have the policy in place and you do have the permissions and you are aware of your organization's policy. You can use these open source models, but with open source models, you have to know, do you have the bandwidth? They can be, some of them can be large. Do you have your bandwidth, and are you able to store the models to then use them? They integrate well. They integrate very quickly with PyTorch and TensorFlow, which are two popular machine learning frameworks, and you can use these to quickly load the model and use it. So, with a million models, like how do you know how to pick the right open source model for your use case? Well, when you're evaluating an open source model, it helps to understand what the model's good at and whether the model is applicable for your use case. So here we are at Hugging Face, right? And you can see that there's, these different sort of tabs up here. I had selected model before this when I went into Hugging Face. And I'm right here at models, so you can see that nothing has changed, right? I think. Please see those numbers again. So, but if I wanted to figure out what was my use case, I would look at tasks right here on your left, right? So you got the main, you got tasks, and it gives you multimodal, so meaning that could do more than one thing, image, text to text, right? Visual question and answering, and so forth. Computer vision, depth detection, object detection, image classification, image segmentation, zero-shot image classification, and then you have the natural language processing, right? So some of the things that I was interested in, which was translation. So you want to know whether that model that you're looking at, right, is up to your use case. It's going to be applicable for what you're looking at. And then the other thing you're going to want to know is, does that model, I want to understand like the, you want to understand like what was the model trained on? So when I went looking for a model that could ID languages, I didn't want just any model that could ID language, because a lot of those models were trained on very long text and paragraphs and, and so forth. So I wanted a model to be trained on very short social media tweets, right? Very short 1 word, 2 word, 3 word sentences, right? Very short text. So it has to be very specialized. So the model could be trained on public data. It could be trained on, something very specialized, like I spoke about. So apart from tasks, you could actually also put in here like, let's see, spelling, right? Once you go into spelling, maybe you want spelling correction. So even in here in the search bar right here, you could try to look for your test or use case, right? Or the model you want to look at. But there's other things you want to look at when you're trying to select the model. You also want to look at the model popularity. So if I put in here, let's say I wanted translation, right? I come up here, I see that this Facebook, the No Language Left Behind model, right, is very popular. Look how many downloads there are. Look how many likes there are. These are things that are letting you know that this is probably a very well-performing model right away. So you want to kind of, look for those things when you are choosing a model. So you could, get these models from Hugging Face or GitHub. And with GitHub, you want to look at the number of forks or blocks associated with the model. You want to also review the licensing. Let me see if I could show you what that will look like. Here we've got the model card, which it explains. It's somewhere, it should be in here. Ethical considerations, caveats and recommendations. I didn't see the license here. It could be because I'm not really looking. I'm just quickly trying to find everything. But there should be somewhere. I'll see if I could show you an example of that. But you're saying, okay, well, I found the model, great. Okay, if you actually click on this, you click on it, it should show you other models that Facebook has as well. So it shows you a collection of other models that it has as well. But let's go back to the model that we wanted to look at, this No Language Left Behind. If you wanted to actually figure out what you wanted to download, you want to go to Files and Versions, and you can see here that it's going to give you all the code and the models, right? It's going to show you all the source code. So be careful. You want to have the bandwidth when you are downloading this to run it locally. This is some of the things I wanted to show you. So you're going to download the model, right? Going to policy, and then you're going to build fine-tuning around it or an inference pipeline around it, and you're going to then test it. Test the model. Once you have it, you think it's going to work for your use case, but you still need to test the model with training data or your use case to see if it actually works what you want it to work for. So I wanted to show you also here, let's see, here's a model that I'm interested in, right? And let me see if I could find stuff here. Here we have the license. Let me see if it's here. Oh, not here. Okay, so here, if I click on license, it should tell me, right, it's the MIT license. Permission is hereby granted free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of the software and associated documentation files. So it's basically saying you can use this. It's saying what you're including without limitation, that you can actually modify this and distribute it and use it. So that's really good. You want that because there are times when you may need to get permission to use a model that you find hosted on GitHub. And I just wanted to show you also another place. So if you're excited like I am about open source models, and you just want to sort of see what they can do, so I go here to github.com/marketplace, and you want to slash this with models instead of, I'm already in here, so I'm looking at everything, and we were talking about maybe translating SAS into open source code, and I wanted to show you that GitHub hosts all these models here. You have OpenAI or even the mini models here. You have Llama, and I want to go to the, oh boy, did I go over time? So let me get out of here. I just wanted to show you one last one. CodeStroll, it says here that if you go to it, you could actually go to the playground and you could type in here prompt and see if it's actually going to translate your code. It's actually going to work as it claims. So you can actually explore and test these models that you see here. Let me get out of here and stop sharing because I think I've hogged up all the time and I truly apologize.
No, you're
I just get
fine.
really
You're fine.
excited.
Can you put
So,
some links in the chat for
yes,
that? Yep. So
yes.
so we have just a few minutes, so we of course want to wrap up. And I actually want to see if anyone in the audience has hints and tips in terms of, I realized that at the beginning we did not do the general disclaimer that these are the opinions of us and not the Census Bureau or anyone else. I realized we should probably do that. And also, before you download any of the fun things that Hannah showed you, make sure that your agency allows you to use them, right? Or do it on your own personal computer. So I want to open it up to everyone for these last couple of minutes, but I want to just hit a couple questions that were still in there in the chat. One person asked about the costs, the long-term cost savings. And I'm not the budget person, I'm not the cost person, but for me, one of the advantages of using open source software is open science, is the ability to share code, to be able to share the science in a little bit more open way. And I think that's one of the great ways. And I don't know how the costs work out in the law in the wash. Right now we have higher costs of trying to learn the programs, but ultimately that might be lower once everyone learns. But I think one of the really important things is this ability to share, especially research. And the other question or comment that was in here that I think is really important. Someone says, I work on modeling software and associated tools that have been much more designed for non-research use, i.e. the focus is historically on making tools easier for users. How do you make the pitch or justify investment to make legacy software open source in the face of arguments that researchers are the only ones who benefit from transitioning to open source? So I think this is, other people may have other comments for this, but for me, I think that there are two sort of things here, is that I think, I don't know that we can actually make legacy software open source. I think instead we end up adopting open source tools. And for me, the idea of using open source tools is that they are able to develop things that are more user-friendly and accessible. So for example, creating dashboards and creating interactive tools and interactive visualizations. And I think if we can create those using open source tools, we can actually open the playing field for non-researchers to use those dashboards and use the information without having to actually use software or program for themselves, that they can actually just use those dashboards. So for me, I think that's like the strength and the quality of using open source software, is to be able to put information out there in a way that is more usable for non-research or non-experts. So we have like a couple of minutes. Does anyone have any quick hints, tips that they would like to add here? Let me see. Yes. What is your process to ensure that code shared publicly isn't an accidental disclosure risk? That is very good. So we actually have agency sort of guidelines that we use to make sure that we use code, and Hannah's gonna talk a little bit more about that in the chat. Is there any other questions or comments? We're very happy to have been here. And since we just have like another couple of minutes, I just wanted to say thank you for all of you for lively discussion. There's lots of stuff that happened in the chat, and I tried to get to all of it, but if I didn't get your question, you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to chat with you more. Thank you so much for a lively discussion, and thank you so much for having us. I'm going to turn it over now to the GASP group.
Thank you so much for that really great panel, Ray. And it really was great to have an opportunity at the end where there was quite a lot of discussion and a lot of ideas put out, and just kind of a little bit more of an emergent session based on what people really wanted to see. So I really appreciate that. Just a real quick thing on the final logistics, and then I'm going to hand over the floor to Dr. Ellen Galantucci. So our final logistics, a lot of times people say, hey, are you going to share the slides? Is there going to be a recording? Yes, we're going to be working on that, and we'll be in communication with the presenters about that within the next week. We're also in the process of setting up a special issue of the Journal of Data Science, as we had done in with the 2023 meeting. So be on the lookout for that. And I'll put a couple of links in the chat about that. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Galantucci, who is the chair of the Data Science for Federal Statistics Interest Group of the Federal Committee on Statistical Methodology. You're still muted, Ellen. Although my screen claims that you're not, so there may be some double mutation going on.
Okay, now can you hear me better?
Yay!
Yay! It just kept saying that I hadn't allowed my microphone, and I have. I swear I know how to use a computer. Good afternoon, happy Friday. I get to swoop in here at the conclusion of the GASP conference and reflect on what has been just an outstanding event. First and foremost, I want to commend all of the presenters for their exceptional work, the depth of knowledge, innovative techniques, and insightful findings shared over these last few days have been nothing short of inspiring. Each presentation has contributed immensely to advancing our understanding and capabilities within the realm of statistical programming. I know that I am leaving this week with so many ideas that have been sparked by the presentations I've seen here. I want to extend our deepest gratitude to the American Statistical Association and Donna Lalonde specifically for their generous support. Without ASA's partnership, this conference would not have been possible. They provided the Zoom access that we've been using all week, the webpage to store our materials and registration information. They even beautified our advertising materials, so we're so grateful for their support. I want to thank the program committee and the session chairs. Their hard work in organizing and coordinating the sessions ensured that everything ran smoothly and that we could all benefit from the rich content offered throughout the conference. And most importantly, a very, very special thank you goes to the two individuals who have been the backbone of this conference, Lisa Freehill and Peter Meyer. Their dedication, hard work, and leadership have been instrumental in bringing the conference to life. Lastly, I want to express how wonderful it's been to experience some degree of normalcy in our federal statistical community. Coming together at this conference is such a great demonstration of the collaborative spirit that's so vital to our work. It's heartening to see all of us united in our shared mission to advance the field of statistics. So thank you for your participation, your engagement, and your unwavering commitment to excellence in statistical programming. I look forward to our continued collaboration and the many achievements yet to come. So I can't wait till we can come together for the next GASP conference. Back over to you, Lisa and Peter.
Peter, do you want to have a couple of closing remarks? People have been hearing me all week.
We'd welcome suggestions about future GASP prospects regarding publications in journals, future conferences, and so forth by email. And the data science for federal statistics community will continue to meet and may have other kinds of seminars. I'm set.